Part 2, the objectives of the university. The university is dedicated to the pursuit of science and scholarship. Research and teaching seek to contribute to intellectual culture as a way in which truth becomes meaningful and manifest. The task of the university may therefore be distinguished into the three functions of research: the transmission of learning and education to culture. Each of these, when considered in isolation, is clearly inseparable from the other two. Chapter 4. In order to do the work of the university successfully, there must be communication of thinking men. Scholars must communicate with one another, teachers with the students, and the students among themselves. Communication of all with all is necessary, each according to his intellectual level. We shall have to take up the meaning of this communication, the forms it may take, and its freedom. Here is the living core of university life, and that will be Chapter 5. The university achieves its objectives within the framework of an institution. This framework is basic to its very existence and is reflected in its procedural and administrative practices. The institution is simultaneously indispensable and a standing threat to the idea of the university. By definition, knowledge aims at unification. Isolated disciplines may come and go. Within the cosmos of learning, they nonetheless seek one another. The university is articulated in such a way as to represent the unity of knowledge, and that will be Chapter 7. Chapter 4. Research, Education, and Instruction. The student comes to the university in order to study the arts and sciences and to prepare himself for a profession. Despite the apparent clarity of his task and situation, the student is frequently perplexed. Overwhelmed by the sheer mass of what can be learned, he wants to know what is of chief importance. Orientation lectures, practice sessions, and syllabi only partially help to overcome his difficulties. In the last analysis, he must find his own way in the world of lectures, laboratories, and seminars. But the student expects even more from the university. To be sure, he studies a special field and has in mind a definite profession. Still, the university, with its aura of tradition, represents to him the unity of all branches of learning. He respects this unity and expects to experience it, and through it to arrive at a well-founded Weltanschauung, or worldview. He wants to arrive at truth, wants to gain a clear view of the world and of people. He wants to encounter wholeness, an infinite cosmic order. Science and learning are essentially of the spirit. They seek relations to the totality of all there is to be known. Yet even with all this, youth is not satisfied. The young person has a heightened sense of the seriousness of life since he is aware of the weighty decisions still ahead. He feels plastic, full of possibilities. He is aware that what becomes of him depends largely upon himself. He feels that his daily life is what counts, every hour, every living impulse. The young person wants to learn either by apprenticing himself to a master, through self-discipline, or through frank discussion among friends similarly motivated. One's expectations are only seldom fulfilled at a university. The first rush of enthusiasm does not last. Perhaps the student never had been quite clear about what he wanted, what he was doing. At any rate, he becomes disillusioned, confused. He ceases striving and loses himself in blind alleys. He studies for examinations only and judges everything according to what use it will have for examinations. He considers his period of study as a painful transition before his professional life can begin. The latter now holds the promise of salvation. He says that he is probably too stupid to grasp the essentials, resigns himself to practicing his specialty. On the other hand, his originally creative enthusiasms may lose their vitality and become a matter of lip service. He becomes lazy in his work, wants to grasp the idea, unity, profundity directly without any disagreeable effort, which to his way of thinking grasps only trivia. He thinks that by reading a few good books, he is doing scholarly work. He finally perverts true effort to the point where he seeks an edifying frame of mind rather than scholarship, and mistakes the classroom for the pulpit. If he is lucky, the individual student makes his own way, a way that leads to development and purpose, guided only by his personal intuition. Ultimately, he who does not know where he is going goes the farthest. Reflection on the overall implications of his proposed work will not directly help any man to get his bearings, but it will help him indirectly by making him aware of possibilities and limitations and thus prevent confusion. The aspiring scholar will reflect on the broader questions of direction, order, and aims of his work, for the will to know implies the will to understand clearly what one is doing. Our discussion here aims to assist this quest for intellectual clarity as a way of life, a form of human existence. 3 things are required at a university: a professional training, education of the whole man, research. For the university is simultaneously a professional school, a cultural center, and a research institute. People have tried to force the university to choose between 3 possibilities. They have asked what it is that we really expect the university to do. Since, so they say, it cannot do everything, it ought to decide upon one of these 3 alternatives. It was even suggested that the university as such be dissolved to be replaced by 3 special types of school: institutes for professional training, institutes for general education, possibly involving a special staff, and research institutes. In the idea of the university, however, these 3 are indissolubly united. One cannot be cut off from the others without destroying the intellectual substance of the university, and without at the same time crippling itself. All 3 are factors of a living whole. By isolating them, the spirit of the university perishes. Research. Within the life of the university, teachers and students are driven by a single motive: man's basic quest for knowledge. For every advance in knowledge, however, stubborn, indefatigable work is necessary. This work involves 3 factors. 1. Work in its narrower sense consists of learning and practicing, widening one's realm of knowledge, and mastering methods. Work is the basis of everything else. Work more than anything stands in need of discipline and order. It is most time-consuming and can be initiated at any time. Only hard work can lay the indispensable foundations, can fashion our tools, and can supply the necessary method through which to express and check any new discovery, as well as the actual verification of what would remain mere conjecture. No one can fail to respect the sheer discipline and endurance of persistent effort. The student should start in on this work immediately, as he has learned it in school. Quote, "The sooner we realize," says Goethe, "that there is a systematic way, call it craft or call it art, of augmenting our natural endowments, the happier we are," end quote. But whoever boasts about his craftsman-like competence and thinks that it suffices to make his contribution valuable is lost in a morass of materials and technique. Sheer industry is not above resenting enviously and ignobly any genuine intellectual competence with its far broader scope. 2. If work is not to be just endless drudgery, if there is to be meaning in it, it needs something which cannot be attained through goodwill alone. Ideas which are not rational but truly intuitive first give impetus to the scientist, invest his discoveries with importance. Ideas grow and move. They cannot be compelled by will alone. They grow, however, only for those people who are steadily at work. Conjectures are unpredictable and incalculable. That which alone causes learning to thrive, something unclear, opaque to reason, and impossible to manufacture, just this demands devoted care. The man who does intellectual research belongs to that group of men who must forever think about their subject, who are thoroughly permeated by their work. His is not the compartmentalization of life into work and amusement. One's way of life is a requisite condition for ideas, especially if these are to be taken seriously. Many a man has had a good idea, but uncaring has soon forgotten about it. 3. Above and beyond mere industry, the scholar and scientist has an intellectual conscience. While he realizes that everywhere he must trust to luck and right instinct, he strives at the same time for conscious and honest control over his creative impulses. Unthinking industry without aims, mere feeling and belief, mere consent and edification, which do not in turn impel him to a creativity of his own, run equally counter to his conscience. The scholar tries to relate chance and isolated occurrences to a whole. He strives for continuity, resists arbitrary interruption of a line of thought. But he does interrupt it when his conscience compels him to follow up some idea which might lead him further. He then turns to pursue this intensively. He is as distrustful of frequent reorientations as he is of absolute continuity along a single line of thought. Because he strives for the ultimate implications of his ideas and wishes to bring these out in his work, he is little concerned with what is merely fashionable or current. But he is concerned with the present moment as the incarnation of eternity. He is able to seclude himself. He knows that no one on the outside can judge whether or not he is proceeding correctly. His intellectual conscience decides for him. No outside advice can lighten the burden of his responsibility. It is the responsibility of the university to promote intellectual work based on these three elements. The process of learning ideals with definite subject matter. Nothing is exempt from this radical quest for knowledge. Whatever exists in the world should be brought into the scope of the university so as to become object for study. Knowledge cannot be created exclusively by the mind. Only the mathematician and the logician are self-contained in this sense and need not go beyond everyday experience. The student at all times requires material for empirical observation. Because the university realizes this, it furnishes him with additional aids, such as collections, libraries, and clinics. Materials for study and research or pictures of them, apparatuses, and experimental equipment are also made available. Yet inanimate objects alone do not make up all that there is to be known. Mind is intrinsically alive. A given historical period in civilization can achieve genuine self-awareness. It does so when its thinking members stand in a relationship of give and take with their own time, when they associate with intellectually productive people. The university exists against the undefinable background of an intellectual atmosphere, a human give and take that cannot be induced by an act of will or organization, but either is or is not there. Groups and personal relationships of an incalculable sort are formed. The university is impoverished if this human intellectual lifeblood ceases to pulse through its veins, or if only pedants and Philistines continue to concern themselves with living material alien to them as human beings. It is impoverished if there is only philology, no philosophy, only technology, but no theory, endless facts, but no ideas. The always limited world of the university is broadened by travel, by admitting visiting scholars, by broad and personally deep relationships, by foreign connections, or if the university contributes its personnel to some practical tasks which others like doctors serve on a permanent basis. All such practical activity may strengthen the idea of the university, provided it can be shared, turned into ideas, and evoke a response to the community of scholars. If research is to be the task of the university, then this task is realizable at the university only in the face of many conflicting obligations. Some have therefore concluded that it would be better to have institutes for pure research alone, unburdened by any other duties. Such research institutes have in fact been organized and turned out good work. Yet fundamentally they remain offshoots of the university. In the long run, they will flourish only in association with the university. They are dependent on the university for their supply of new talent. Moreover, research in itself depends on access to the whole of knowledge and the opportunity of exchange with all sorts of specialists. Where research institutes are not tied to special places by the nature of their research, they do well to locate in university towns. For a certain time, a specialized project can have astounding success, especially in the natural sciences. But the meaning and creative perpetuation of research can only be preserved if it maintains a lively exchange with the whole of knowledge. The individual scientist or scholar may profit from spending a certain length of time, or even the remainder of his life, at a research institute, relieved from the other duties of a university. Yet what he has achieved was accomplished in living exchange with the scholarly community to which he might someday return. Moreover, teaching itself is often, even most of the time, stimulating to research. Above all, teaching vitally needs the substance which only research can give it. Hence, the combination of research and teaching is the lofty and inalienable basic principle of the university. This combination is sound not because it is an economy measure, nor because this combination alone financially enables a scientist or scholar to do his research, but because ideally the best research worker is also the best and only teacher. The research worker may be pedagogically inept, that is, he may be inept in transmitting bare facts, yet he alone can bring the student into contact with the real process of discovery, hence with the spirit of science rather than with dead results which can be committed to memory. He is the spirit of scientific inquiry come to life. In communication with him, one can see knowledge as it genuinely exists. He awakens similar impulses in his students. He directs his students to the source of knowledge. Only he who himself does research can really teach. Others only pass on a set of pedagogically arranged facts. The university is not a high school, but a higher institution of learning. The university has professional schools preparing its graduates for jobs that can only be filled by people with a basically scientific outlook. This requires a familiarity with research and method, as distinct from specialized training in the narrower sense. The best preparation for these special professions is not memorization of a closed body of knowledge, but training and development of the faculties for scholarly and scientific thinking. This alone can lay the foundation for further intellectual and scientific training throughout life. The university can only lay the basis for professional training. Practice alone brings mastery. The university should provide the best possible conditions for this eventual growth through practice. The young person must learn how to ask questions. He must study something systematically, get to the bottom of it, and need not, however, carry the sum total of factual knowledge about in his head. Wherever this is the case, it is of no lasting value. After examinations, one quickly forgets. The decisive factor after this is not the body of fact learned, but one's judgment. What matters then is not factual knowledge by itself, but the ability and initiative to go out and get the facts on one's own, to think about them effectively, to know what questions to ask. Not memorizing facts, but contact with living research imparts this ability. Technical detail, outlines, and the like are not excluded, but are simply left to textbook study. A bare 50 years ago, people used to say that an institution of higher learning is not a high school. It is certainly a good idea to cover in one's theoretical study as many of the practically useful materials as is possible, but the most important factors even so remain: an active intellect, the ability to grasp problems and to pose questions, the mastery of method. By its very name, the university is a universe. Discovery and research constitute an indivisible whole, departmentalization notwithstanding. The university deteriorates if it becomes an aggregate of specialized schools alongside of which it tolerates the so-called general education as mere window dressing and vague talk in generalities. Scholarship depends on a relation to the whole. Individual disciplines are meaningless apart from their relation to the whole of knowledge. Therefore, it is the intention of the university to impart to its students a sense of the unity both of its own particular field of study and of all knowledge. The whole business of schooling, the mastery of routine and of a body of facts, becomes harmful if it loses the sense of relatedness to the ideal of learning or actually prevents the student from living up to this ideal. The university then must provide the professions with a twofold foundation. It must instill a growing lifelong commitment to the scientific outlook as well as to the search for the unity of knowledge. These two are requisite for intellectual professions, which are the professions involving more than the routine practice of specialized knowledge. The doctor, the teacher, the administrator, the judge, the clergyman, the architect are each in his own way professionally concerned with man as a whole and the conditions of human life as a whole. Preparation for these professions is unthinking and inhuman if it fails to relate us to the whole and to develop our preconceptiveness, to show the wide scope of knowledge, or to make us think philosophically. Deficiencies in professional routine, which are bound to exist at the time when the degree is conferred, can be eliminated with practice. Basic deficiencies in scholarly and scientific training are irremediable. Everyone engaged in an intellectual profession is bound to think in scholarly terms. The true scholar or scientist, however, is he who can persist in the effort of protracted thinking without losing sight of the whole. Hence, the best way of imparting practical scientific training is to encourage the habit of research. To address oneself to the whole is what is called the philosophical point of view. All science is philosophical in this sense, so long as it does not neglect the end for the means, and so lose itself and its ideal in a concern for cataloging words and facts, for apparatus, collections, techniques, or isolated phenomena. According to Kant, it is the dignity, the absolute value of philosophy, which lends value to all other branches of knowledge. This does not mean that everyone should study philosophy. Many a man has evinced his philosophical impulse not only in his novel way of posing questions, but in his very attacks upon philosophy in general. Yet the philosophy that matters is the one at work within science and human life itself, as against the mere vocabulary and jargon of philosophy, which is usually what the detractors of philosophy mean to attack. What matters is the philosophical impulse from which research proceeds, the idea which gives research direction, and the meaning which gives it value and ends of its own. The type of philosophical thought has value which can shape and motivate the scientist and scholar, that philosophy, in short, which permeates the whole of the university. The existence of special chairs for philosophy and of a special department for philosophy, where philosophy can flourish without apparent contact with the whole, is justifiable only on purely administrative and pedagogical grounds. Education as formation of the mind. Formal education, like tradition, generally tends to be dependent upon particular forms of social organization. The changes in educational outlook parallel the changes which a nation undergoes in the course of its history. The unifying factor in education reflects the dominance in each case of a given social body, for example, church, class, nation. Education could be described as the manner by which these social bodies perpetuate themselves from generation to generation. Hence, education becomes transformed when there are social revolutions. Moreover, attempts at social innovations turn to pedagogical questions first. Because of this, considerations of the significance and methods of education inevitably include the larger question of state and society. Blueprints for the good society, such as Plato's Republic, treat political and educational organization as coextensive. Education prepares each individual to be a member of society, and, conversely, society is the means of the individual's education. Let us consider some aspects of education from the point of view of the historical changes to which they have been subject. The social need of the times determines what will be included in the curriculum. Theological knowledge is required in preparation for the ministry, training in the skills of using language for hermeneutic education. For the education of the Greek gentleman, a knowledge of myth and legend is required. Today, the importance of sociology, economics, technology, natural science, and geography is stressed. Education changes with cultural ideals. The way schools are organized mirrors the social structure. In the past, diverse types of educational systems have been attempted, such as schools for the several estates, academies for the nobility, and private instruction for aristocrats and patricians. All democracies demand common public education because nothing makes people so much alike as the same education. Apart from sociological and historical considerations, we can distinguish three basic forms of education. 1. Scholastic instruction. This type of education is limited to the mere transmission of the tradition. The teacher only reproduces, he is not himself active in original research. All knowledge has been systematized. Certain authors and books are considered authoritative. The role of the teacher is an impersonal one. He is a representative who may be replaced by anyone else who is qualified. All material is reduced to formula. The medieval teacher dictated a text to his students and commented upon it. The availability of textbooks has made dictating superfluous, but the underlying idea of medieval education is by no means dead today. The student subordinates himself to some system of thought which shelters him, yet without thereby subordinating him to any one personality. Knowledge is frozen for all time into an orderly world picture. Here the student is interested only in what is fixed and permanent, wants to assimilate results, and like the pupil of Goethe's Faust, wants to take home results in black and white. The scholastic approach continues to be indispensable to Western rationalism. 2. Apprenticeship. Of chief importance here is not an impersonal tradition, but a personality felt to be unique. The reverence and love rendered to the master's person have something of worship in them. The distance between master and pupil derives not merely from a quantitative difference of 2 generations, but in addition from an inherent qualitative one. The person of the master exerts an authority with a marvelous power. A wide variety of motives comes into play here. There is the need to subordinate oneself, the desire to avoid responsibility, the relief experienced through association with greatness, coupled with the enhancement of one's sense of self-importance, and the need for a discipline sterner than any we can impose on ourselves. 3. In Socratic education, the teacher and his student ought to stand on the same level. Both are meant to be free. No hard and fast educational system exists here. Rather, endless questioning and ultimate ignorance in the face of the absolute. Personal responsibility is carried to its utmost and is nowhere alleviated. Education is a midwifery in which the student is helped to give birth to his abilities and powers. He is awakened to an awareness of his own capacities. He is not compelled from without. What counts is not the accident of empirical individuality, but our true self, which emerges in the process of self-realization. The Socratic teacher resists his students' urge to make him their authority and master. Herein lies the greatest temptation for students. He turns them away from himself and back onto themselves. He hides in paradoxes, makes himself inaccessible. The intimate relationship between student and teacher here is not one of submission, but of a contest for truth. The teacher knows that he is only human, demands that his students differentiate between human and divine. In all 3 types of education, respect is a dominant factor. In scholastic education, respect focuses on a tradition visible in the very hierarchy of social structure. In apprenticeship training, respect focuses on the personality of the master. In Socratic education, on the transcendent status of mind, which imposes on human life the burden of straddling 2 worlds. Respect is indispensable to education. Without it, industriousness at best remains. Respect is the very substance of all education. Man's humanity requires his realization of the absolute. Without it, all would be meaningless. Within the world, this absolute can be reflected on 3 levels. On the corporate level, such as the social group for which one is being prepared, the state, or an institutionalized form or religion, on an individual level, or on both levels simultaneously. To the extent that its substance becomes problematic, education becomes rigid. Respect is artificially maintained through deliberate secrecy exercised by those in authority. It is maintained also by the demand of blind obedience to a personal authority and by awakening man's desire for submission. Mere fulfillment of duty becomes a substitute for work in behalf of what is essential in education. Instead of striving for one's best achievement, people will seek to gratify their ambitious vanity for recognition and status. The memorization of supposedly useful data replaces the transformation of the entire man by his education. Instead of affirming a given educational ideal with their whole persons, such people are only interested in acquiring quickly to be forgotten facts for an examination which supposedly stamps them as educated. All formal education is free to choose one of these 3 methods of education above discussed, but it presupposes the value of the educational substance communicated. Without faith in this value, no real education can exist, only pedagogical technique. Once the substance of education has become problematic, the faith in its wavering, the question as to what are the aims of education poses itself. It is a hopeless undertaking, however, to seek such ideals in a manner that ignores the actual historical situation and our own real aims, if, in short, one seeks these ideals in isolation from our own lives. This is the reason why educational slogans, such as the following, don't amount to much. Development of special aptitudes, moral improvement, broadening one's frame of reference, character building, national pride, strength and independence, ability to express oneself, development of the personality, creation of a unifying sense of common cultural tradition, etc. Education at a university is Socratic by its very nature. It is not the whole of one's education, nor is it like the instruction one receives in high school. University students are adults, not children. They are mature, have full responsibility for themselves. Professors do not give them assignments or personal guidance. Freedom, the all-important factor, is irreconcilable with even so impressive a training as that which has been traditionally identified with the monastic orders and military academies. This type of submission to rigid training and leadership keeps the individual from experiencing a genuine will to know. It blocks the development of human independence that admits no other source or tie than God himself. University education is a formative process aiming at a meaningful freedom. It takes place through participation in the university's intellectual life. Education is not a task to be pursued in isolation. This is why, next to the principle that research and teaching are indivisible, we have a second principle, which states that research and teaching are in fact inseparable from the educational process as a whole. Research and professional schooling have an educative effect precisely because they do not just transmit facts and knowledge, but awaken ideas of unity and develop a scientific attitude. To be sure, this development of active intelligence is still less than the training of the whole man. That training involves more. Nevertheless, university education is an integral component of it. A university so conceived educates in a way which is neither indefinable nor yet definitive. It educates by involving the rational and philosophical impulse, so decisive for the whole man, in its unbounded commitment to the spirit of inquiry and clarification. To the extent that it succeeds in involving the whole man, it enhances his proper humanity, what the Romans termed man's humanitas, the listening to arguments, understanding, the ability to think along with the viewpoints of others, honesty, discipline, and consistency. But this type of personality is a spontaneous byproduct, not a conscious goal. If education is set up towards this end in isolation from scholarship, what is lost is precisely the intellectual development aimed for. Do we want a thin humanistic education which instead of philological, methodological schooling teaches results, offers beautiful objects to be observed, enjoyed, and talked about? Do we desire an educational process which reaches deeply into the soul, which directs itself toward religious needs? The university is not a church. No religious order, no mystery, nor is it a place for prophets and apostles. Its principle is to furnish all tools and offer all possibilities in the province of the intellect, to direct the individual to the frontiers, to refer the learner back to himself for all his decisions, to his own sense of responsibility. This sense of responsibility has become awakened through his learning and is brought through it to the highest possible level and the clearest awareness. The university demands a ruthless will to know. Since learning and personal initiative go hand in hand, the university aims for the broadest possible development of independence and personal responsibility. Within its sphere, it respects no authority other than truth in its infinite variety, the truth which all are seeking, and yet no one can claim to possess in final and complete form. The idea of the university derives its educational force from the primary human will to know. It gives the educated man both sureness and purpose, and at the same time great humility. Insight alone cannot decide the purpose or ultimate goal of existence. One clear and ultimate purpose is this, at any rate: the world wants to be understood. Research belongs to the university not only because it is the basis of training for the professions, but because the university itself exists for research, fulfills its meaning through research. The student is the scholar and scientist to be. He will remain philosophically and intellectually oriented for the duration of his life if he allows himself to grow along with his thinking, even where his way of shaping reality is practical rather than theoretical, a way no less productive than scientific and scholarly achievement measured in terms of published output. To live freely in the world of ideas is, on first inspection, fraught with danger for the student. He is thrown back upon his own resources, since such a mode of life thrives only on one's own responsibility. From the freedom of teaching springs the freedom of learning. No authority, no rules and regulations, no supervision of studies such as to be found in high schools must be allowed to hamper the university student. He is free to go to the dogs. It has often been said that you have to risk your young men if you want to get a generation of men. There is a place certainly for scholastic instruction, for learning in its narrower sense, and for practice in methods. But the student is free to choose how extensively he wants to participate in this instruction, and when he can get on with books alone without benefit of teachers. Ideally, the relation between professor and student involves a Socratic equality of status, with a mutual stress on standard, not on authority. Intellectual excellence, not mediocrity, sets the tone. We live and work together under the common obligation of calling one another to the highest of standards in thought and performance. Our enemies are smug self-satisfaction and a Philistine attitude. We have a basic desire to be near those whom we admire. Love for the great man, whose very existence makes the greatest demands on us, lends us wings. Still the relation remains Socratic. Nobody becomes authority. The grain of sand remains free and independent next to the cliff, for even the grain of sand is substance. The recognition of an intellectual aristocracy implies making demands upon oneself only, never entitles one to feel superior or make demands upon others. Two things fundamentally unite all members of the university, whether teachers or students: a common calling to exert themselves as if for the very highest attainment, and at the same time, the constant pressure to live up to that calling and prove themselves. It is best in this connection not to indulge in extensive self-analysis, yet on the other hand, not to demand outside recognition. It has been said that students should become leaders of their people. Some have even conceived the strange notion of a school for future leaders. Such notions violate the idea of the university. Leaders come from all classes and occupations. Expert knowledge is attainable not only at a university. Academic training has no monopoly on expert knowledge. It is all well and good to demand intellectuality of a leader. In reality, however, leaders are often made of very different stuff. The world is no Platonic republic ruled by philosophers. Will to power, resoluteness, deliberation, an eye for the realities of the moment, practical experience and success, as well as special traits of character, are the important qualities. Leaders may well come from academic circles, but generally the type of person found in academic professions is not a leader type. The clergyman, the doctor, the teacher is certainly a leader in a limited sense, either because of his formal authority, which has nothing to do with the idea of the university, as long as this is recognized in the society in which he lives, or he may be a leader by virtue of his humanity and spirituality, which manifest themselves to his individual personality. These are again and again put to question and are never a matter of personal claim. Or he may be a leader because of his expert knowledge, which proves itself useful in his specialty. Instruction. The mechanics of instruction involve lectures, seminars, and laboratories in small private groups and discussions between two people. Lectures have held preeminence in teaching for ages. They present the materials to be learned in such a way that the listener can visualize how and for what reasons they were collected. Bare facts can be gathered from books. In lectures, the listener takes notes and is compelled to think about the lecture. He prepares himself for lectures by doing experiments, studying books, and extending his knowledge. One cannot establish a standard for good lectures. If they are good, they have a special quality which cannot be imitated. Their intended meaning, differing widely with the personality of the lecturer, is valuable in each case. There are lectures which aim to instruct and personally involve the listener, which seek to hold him intellectually, and there are lectures where the speaker, totally oblivious to his audience, engages in a monologue about research and progress, yet even so manages to impart a sense of genuine participation in genuine research. Lectures which aim to sum up an entire subject are in a class by themselves. They are indispensable, for they awaken the impulse to envisage the whole, provided thorough work on the details is being pushed at the same time. Such lectures should be given only by the most mature professors drawing upon the sum total of their life's work. There should therefore be general lectures by the most outstanding professors on each of the basic subjects treated as wholes. Fundamental disciplines are those whose specific content have universal significance. As against auxiliary subjects in special techniques, their every detail is not an end in itself, but symbolizes the entire cognitive process. Disciplines whose specialized details succeed in mirroring the whole are by that token universal in character. There are textbooks which manage to convey the universality implicit in such disciplines. The manner in which a given discipline investigates its materials reveals the extent to which it is a fundamental discipline. In the past decades, lectures have been subject to much criticism. They are said to be a one-sided affair which encourages a passive attitude on the part of the listener, that any sign as to whether the listener has understood and assimilated the lecture is lacking, that the subject of the lecture is usually better stated in books and can be learned more quickly from these. These objections apply to poor lectures, which repeat a dead body of knowledge identically from year to year, or to lectures which are little more than an easy, informal flow of talk. Lectures are of value when they become a genuine part of a professor's life work, when they are prepared with care and at the same time inevitably reflect contemporary intellectual life. Such lectures belong to what is irreplaceable in tradition. The memory of outstanding scholars lecturing accompanies one throughout life. The printed lecture, perhaps even taken down word for word, is only a pale residue. True, what is of value in the lecture, its content, still communicates in printed form, but the lecturer himself presents this content in such a way as to suggest the total context which motivates his scholarship. Through his tone, his gestures, the real presence of his thinking, the lecturer can unconsciously convey the feel of the subject. No doubt this can only be conveyed by the spoken word, and only in a lecture, not in conversation or discussion. The lecture situation evokes something from the teacher which would remain hidden without it. There is nothing artificial about his thinking, his seriousness, his questioning, his perplexity. He allows us to take part in his innermost intellectual being. This great value is lost the moment it becomes contrived. Right away, the result is affectation, rhetoric, pathos, artificial formulas, effects, demagoguery, shamelessness. Hence, there are no rules for the preparation of a good lecture. One needs to do no more than to take the matter seriously, to consider the lecture a high point in one's professional responsibility and achievement, finally to renounce all artificiality. In the century and a half of important lectures from Kant to Max Weber, it has become evident that even if the speaker falters and makes mistakes in his speech, if his sentences are grammatically incomplete or wrong, if his voice is not effective, none of these things is able to destroy the profound effect of the lecture if its intellectual substance is communicated. Lecture notes convey no more than a weak reflection of actual lectures. Yet even in the absence of personal recollection, our imagining what they must have been like can be a challenge to us. In seminars and laboratory work, methods are mastered through practical contact with materials, apparatus, and concepts which are studied by concrete example. By his own initiative, the student may extend his understanding of these matters. Mastery of techniques occupies the greater amount of effort. We shall not take up the methods of teaching appropriate to different fields and their different technical facilities. Many fields have at their disposal a firm pedagogical tradition to serve as skeleton, not as substitute for instruction. These seminars and laboratories are designed to acquaint us directly with the subject matter and the elements of learning. They differ basically from courses which merely transmit information, courses which make up for the lack of intellectual initiative on the part of students unable to do better and more rapid work on their own. For in every detail, the whole is always implicitly and indirectly present. Textbook knowledge is only incidentally referred to and briefly reviewed in class so as to make the student aware where he has to fill in gaps on his own. The essential factor is to train one's perceptions through personal collaboration on the frontiers of knowledge. The kind of work which best motivates independent study is that which, presupposing general textbook knowledge, deals with a particular problem and goes straight to the heart of the matter. Textbooks by themselves are tiresome. Conversely, to chain oneself to a single object makes one narrow. Each gives life to the other. Finally, education may take the form of discussion. Questions of basic importance are brought up in small groups, all members of which participate actively. This, in turn, will induce some of the participants to conclude the discussion alone with the teacher in a serious and lively give and take. Here, student and teacher meet one another on the same level, as is the ideal. Together they will strive to formulate the problem with such clarity and precision as will awaken impulses in each by himself to make solid personal contributions later on. Teaching at the university must not be allowed to get into a rut. Wherever teaching is intellectually alive, it cannot help taking personal form. Paradoxically, only when the professor has a truly objective approach to ideas does his teaching have genuine individuality. Digressions, which are simultaneously objective and personal, combine with the special needs of the moment to keep teaching fresh and lively. Teaching is one thing when it addresses itself to the average student, quite another when it addresses itself to the gifted few. The basic difference between high school and university is that in high schools, a teacher must teach all the students entrusted to him. In the university, however, he has no such obligation. University education is meant for a number of selected people who are filled with a very special intellectual zeal and have sufficient mental equipment to do the work. In effect, the people who attend the university are an average group of people who have been able to acquire the necessary preparation. The weeding out process is therefore up to the university. The prospective student should have the following qualities: a desire for objectivity and an irrepressible self-sacrificing drive to intellectual attainment. These qualities cannot be objectively detected ahead of time. Only a minority of people possess these qualities, which, in addition, are distributed in a wholly unpredictable way. They can be cultivated and made effective only indirectly. Yet it is to this minority that the university must direct itself if it is to live up to its own ideal standards. The true student can be relied on to make his way amid the difficulties and mistakes inevitably and necessary for intellectual growth, unperplexed by the mass of courses offered. Selectivity and discipline guide his studies. We must be prepared to accept, perhaps even welcome, the fact that the rest, at a loss for guidance, will learn next to nothing. Artificial guides, such as the syllabi, curricular, and other technical devices which convert the university into a high school, are in conflict with the ideal of the university. They have resulted from adapting the university to the needs of the average student, on the grounds that the great mass of students should be made to learn enough at least to pass the examinations. This line of reasoning, appropriate enough to the high school, is detrimental to the university, where the students are adults, even considering no more than their ages. Nonetheless, university instruction cannot center around the handful of superlative students. Rode, the historian of Greek religion, taught that out of 100 students, 99 do not understand the teacher, and the 100th does not need him. If true, that would be disheartening. University education addresses itself not to the few geniuses or to the mediocre average, but to the minority who, while capable of growth and of initiative, nevertheless stand in need of instruction. Some instruction geared to the abilities of the less gifted and lazy students, who are the average, is probably indispensable. By and large, however, university education is different. Lectures and seminars which are slightly over the student's head, and so spur him on to increased effort, are better than full comprehension purchased at the price of oversimplification. Independent reading and study in laboratories, collections, and traveling must complement formal classroom work from the very start. Where instruction is geared to the pace of the brightest among the promising minority already mentioned, the mediocre majority of students will have to exert themselves. All are working under a standard which no one entirely satisfies. Respect for the intellectually first rate must provide all with an incentive to exert themselves to the utmost of their abilities. Lectures follow one another according to some general order and plan. The sequence in which the beginner hears them is not unimportant. Hence, compulsory study plans have come into being. In this way, however, university study ends in being straitjacketed. The university is turned into a high school in order to achieve a satisfactory average with statistical certainty. This leads to the destruction of the university. As you stifle the student's freedom to learn as he sees fit, you stifle the life of the mind. The life of the mind is never more than a chance achievement amid a sea of failure and frustration. It is always something over and above average performance. Both student and teacher are unhappy when chained to curricula and syllabi, to tests and mediocre standards. An atmosphere of uninspired and uninspiring common sense may well produce satisfactory mastery of technical know-how and testable factual information, Such an atmosphere, however, stifles genuine understanding and the spirit of adventure in research. Thank you for listening to this audio recording by David McKerracher, published by Theory Underground. This work has been placed in the public domain because of its importance. I hope that you all enjoy this during your holidays in its small daily doses, like an advent calendar. And that if you are intrigued to hear lectures on the topic of the idea of the university, then I hope you will consider joining the course that I am leading with Brian Weeks and Ann Snellgrove, the three of us, all educators interested in the idea of higher education and a kind of learning environment that cares about the freedom of individuals to be able to research what they find most interesting, as opposed to what big business or political partisans think you ought to be researching. I'm going to actually show you all really quick what the website looks like. So you go to theory-underground.com. Make sure to register with the website and then go to courses right here. You can also go to events and get to it that way. And then right here you see Mikey teaches Žižek for They Know Not What They Do. That's a class that kicks off in February. We also have Professional Managerial Class Consciousness. That's kicking off at the end of January. And I'm teaching that one with Elton. And then the idea of the university right here. All three of these are courses that you can add to your shopping cart and choose to take if you want. But the idea of the university, if you click on it, if you're not already logged in, then this is what you should see. Click Take This Course, click Add to Cart, View Cart, and then proceed to checkout. Oh, one quick thing, don't forget, I guarantee the verification email will be sent to your spam folder. So if you're going, I tried to sign up with their website, I registered and everything, I just never got the email. Don't worry, it's in your spam folder. You just have to find it, and you might not be able to find it from your phone. You might have to actually sit down at a laptop. I'm sorry, it's not always as easy as giant mega corporations make it when you try to do stuff underground. So go for it, try it out, let me know if it works. Okay, bye. So anyway, that's how you do it. I hope to see you there in the discussions on the Zoom chat, but also in the forums where the real conversation will hopefully be taking place on the website. Anyway, everyone, Merry Christmas, Happy New Year. Take care.